How often do you look for treasure in life scars? In what ways can we look after our mental and emotional health? And who are you having open and honest conversations with? Hello everybody and welcome to the Kintsugi Hope podcast. My name is Jess. It's great to have you with us today. I'm joined by a colleague but also a good friend, Lynette Brooks. Lynette, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, as you've just said, my name's Lynette Brooks, and I'm part of the Kintsugi Hope team, which is an absolute delight, and I've been part of the team for about 8-9 months now. Before that, going way back, I trained as a nurse and then trained as a health visitor, and then went to Bible school overseas, and then worked in a Bible school in Jamaica, actually, and then came back to the UK and started to work with an organisation called CWR, who is now Waverley Abbey Trust, and worked with them in terms of publishing and course development and delivery. And whilst they're also trained to be a counsellor, so quite a varied background, but people have always been at the heart of what I've done. And now I'm delighted to be part of the amazing team at Kintsugi Hope.
Amazing. Wow, you've had a very varied career. And it sounds like you've met a lot of people. And you're training as a counsellor as well. Did you mention that?
Yes, yeah. I did.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Lynette, today we're going to talk about anger. And anger is one of those like weird emotions, isn't it? Because it kind of creeps up on you. Some people might experience anger once or twice in their life. Like some people have, quite a lot of anger that kind of is there all the time. In your opinion, what is anger? How would you summarize it?
Wow, that's a big question. Because, I think like with all emotions, Jess, sometimes we label them positive and sometimes we label them negative emotions. And sometimes we don't even recognize them or can give them a name.
Right.
So I think when it comes to anger, a lot of us don't like to acknowledge that we're angry. But if you think about it as a range of emotions, actually, it can kind of fall into a group of anything from mild irritation, which we might all acknowledge every day we face for all sorts of reasons, right through to frustration and then full-blown anger. But what is it? Well, it is often actually a result of either being hurt or being wounded or being stopped in doing something that we really want to do. So if you look at it as almost like a goal, sometimes, even if it's I want to go out to the shops, but my child throws a wobbly and I can't go out, something has stopped me doing what I want to do. So I think that might cause irritation, it might cause frustration, but depending on what else is going on inside me and what I'm thinking and telling myself, then actually it could be full-blown anger that comes out. And at that point it would be, why has this provoked such a strong reaction? And it's not always negative. I think we see anger as often being a negative, bad thing. But sometimes, I don't know, maybe we should see it as a gift in a way that we shouldn't ignore and say, what's it actually for? Really strong emotion telling me, what do I do about it?
That's brilliant. And I think at Kintsugi in the groups, we talk about how anger is an emotional response to pain. Like you said, it's can be like a blocked goal, like you've just said. And I think when I heard that, I was like, oh wow, like that's so interesting because we've all been through pain, and one of the things that we can feel after a loss or disappointment is actually that sense of just feeling so frustrated and like we just want to scream into a pillow. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because anger can also be something that's not shouting and screaming. It can be how when you get angry, how does it come across with you?
Gosh, I would let out a giant grrr, and then not that I am perfectly in tune with my emotions whatsoever, so I'm not heralding myself as being I never get angry. But when you sort of have read about what causes anger and what's really going on inside, I think I do my best to just do that stepping back thing. I mean, when you hit your thumb with a hammer or you bang your head on a shelf, you don't want to read, well, the definition in the Oxford Dictionary of angry is actually, that it's a strong feeling of displeasure. So where is this displeasure coming from? You want to let it out and you want to go, that really hurt. And I think that's really helpful when it comes to what do I do when I get angry? Yes, I might seethe inside, or I might just go, but then at some point, it's really helpful for me and for whoever or whatever has initiated that really strong feeling inside me, is to say, what's going on? Is it that emotional response to pain? Am I mildly irritated? Am I deeply hurt? And so I think once we can step back, that old adage of count to 10, that can really still help when it comes to monitoring our own feelings, really. Like, okay, my initial reaction, I am gonna let it out, and that's okay. But then it's okay, so what's making me angry? Why? Is there a goal or something I really want to achieve that is being stopped or thwarted or blocked? Or has it poked a bruise that is there from the past that, I was totally downtrodden once and really lost my self-respect and, really felt worthless. And then someone says something that makes that emotion rise up again. And it's like, oh, you've poked that bruise. And that's actually really made me angry because you've made this rise up inside me again. So I think it's really helpful if we can find ways to just say, why? What's really going on for me? In the heat of the moment, that's really, really hard to do. But so we need to find a way of dealing with that in the heat of the moment. But also I think it's really helpful if we do battle with feeling angry quite a lot of time, is to say why and what's really going on.
And I guess like undealt with anger can actually, like you're right, it can lead to bruises that can come up at unpredictable times in the future. What else can happen like internally for us if we don't process anger and we don't, because it's sometimes too painful to ask, why did that make me angry in the moment? So like you said, sometimes having some time away from the situation, having some time to process, and then going, why did that make me angry? I guess what can happen when we don't allow ourselves that space?
I think it stays buried. I think you can't bury a live emotion. You can't just shove it down so far that we expect it to just die and go away. I think there's been quite a bit of research that proves that there's some physical damage actually that can happen when we withhold anger, because it makes us tense, it can create stress, and all of those things that come from tension and stress physically to our bodies actually can be quite harmful to us. So that can happen if we don't acknowledge it. And I think as well, it's a case of just saying, can I name what's really going on? Because I think you said earlier, Jess, about it can be a response to pain. So can I think what's really going on? Am I disappointed? Am I sad? Am I feeling worthless? What's actually going on inside? But I think if we don't acknowledge it, you could almost see yourself as this sort of iceberg, if you like, and what's going on up here is me day to day, trucking along through life. But underneath that surface level of where my head is the tip of the iceberg, there's so much going on underneath. And the more all of us can actually say what's going on underneath. And sometimes it's as simple as, I just need to take 10 minutes out here and relax. Sometimes dealing with anger involves relaxation techniques or going for a walk and removing myself from the situation. But any kind of emotion that is quite intense, any intense feeling really deserves some attention. So at some point, not always in the heat of the moment, but at some point, it's really good to say what's going on underneath here.
And I get that relies on having a safe space, doesn't it, to either alone or having someone, a partner or a friend or somebody else that you trust to be able to go, this really caused me pain. And I guess some things make us angry in a fleeting moment, like somebody cuts us up in the car and we don't necessarily need to process that. We can understand that person cut me up and it made me angry and now I'm over it 5 seconds later. But other things are more painful and actually deserve that processing space. How can we facilitate a space for somebody to process any kind of pain, I guess? What does that look like?
Well, you mentioned it, I think, Jess. You said a safe space, which we don't all have. And I think that comes back in measure, and I hope it's going to still answer your question, is to the fact that if any emotion from irritation right through to anger is a result of not getting what we want for some reason, when you boil it down to what do we all want, and we don't always recognize it, we don't acknowledge it, and we don't know it. But I would say the 3 things that we all actually want are to feel loved, to feel valued, and to feel that we've got some purpose or some significance in life. If any one of those 3 things we're not getting, whether that's through our faith or whether that's through a relationship with somebody, then actually we're going to be looking for other ways to have those feelings, those needs for either safety or love or value met. So at that point, it's where do I find one or all of those things? Some people might find it in nature by going for a walk. Some people might find it in their relationship in the spiritual realm, their relationship with God. Others may find it in a friendship. And I would say that if you're not finding that in any way whatsoever, then there's going to be ramifications for how we live our lives in terms of how we monitor positive and negative emotions, and the whole range in between, really.
I was just reflecting on how kids, young children, they're very honest with their emotions, aren't they? Because they don't have that filter. They feel angry and they let it out in a scream or a shout or a, no, that's not fair. And we get to a point where we stop doing that. We stop being so vocal with the things that disappoint us and hurt us. And, obviously, children feel things you don't necessarily have the experience and the, the worldview that obviously an adult does. And, understanding that sometimes you can't just get everything you want. But I think that's so interesting because we we forget to be so vocal with how we feel, and that's across the board, whether it's anger or whether it's sadness or whether it's joy. I guess there's something to be said for taking an example from children, I guess, and being like, yeah, like, you know, we might not shout and scream like a child would, but actually going, that actually made me really frustrated and I want to talk about that. And I think that's so good. How? Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. And, you know, there probably are times when as adults, we feel that joy and we want to just skip down the street like a little kid would if you say, let's go and get some sweets or go and get an ice cream. And it's like, yay, that joy. And it's expressed outwardly. Or if someone pinches their toy or does whatever or says, no, you can't get that in a shop, and there's a full-blown tantrum. And I think you've touched on something really important there, Jess, because it's what we tell ourselves as we start to grow up and become independent and supposed grown-ups. It's what we tell ourselves about expressing those emotions that has a massive impact on how we do it. And it also has a massive impact on what we think about ourselves and other people. So, you know, if when you got angry as a kid, you were told that's naughty, stop it, you mustn't behave like that, that will start to feed into what you tell yourself as an adult about feelings that result in anger.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are soothed by a parent to say, that must have been really sad, or that must have hurt you, or you must be disappointed, you know, let me give you a cuddle and let's just talk about it. If that's the approach of expressing such an intense feeling, such as anger, then we tell ourselves something very different as we grow up and have to manage those feelings mostly on our own a lot of the time and evaluate those feelings and either allow ourselves to feel them, don't. But as I think we've already touched on a little bit, they bubble away inside us, whether we name them and acknowledge them or not really. And sometimes it can almost be a bit more acceptable to us to get angry and to feel angry because we feel justified in that anger and it's, you know, it is unfair. But actually, sometimes it's easier as a grown-up to say, I'm angry, as opposed to saying, I'm really hurt, or really disappointed, or I'm really sad. Because we don't always allow ourselves to feel that, but it's almost easier to just go that sort of, oh, life is so unfair and it's just so annoying, as opposed to, I'm really sad.
Yeah, you're so right. Because it's almost, I don't know why, there must be some reason why we feel anger. We can say, I'm really angry, or I'm annoyed, or I don't know, I don't want to say it, but I'm peed off. Like we're more accepting of that language than I feel really sad or I feel disappointed. Like, I don't know, those words, I guess they seem a bit more deep and maybe a bit more kind of like exposing, whereas anger is a bit more like, I just feel a little bit annoyed. And like, I guess maybe we're used to moaning. We're used to having something to complain about, and maybe we're more used to that language being associated with being annoyed or being peed off or being angry than we are being disappointed. I guess disappointment sounds quite deep, doesn't it? Like, oh, I'm so disappointed. But actually, it's not. Like, we all experience disappointment every day. Like, particularly within the last 18 months, we've had disappointment after disappointment. Do you reckon there's been a rise in kind of like general anger over the last 18 months because of COVID?
Possibly. I mean, sometimes I think when we think about what might have made us angry over this last 18 months, some of it could be loss. We've lost so much, and we might redirect that loss into an anger because of all the reasons we've just said. It's a bit more acceptable somehow. Sometimes we have to think, am I angry at people, or am I angry about something? And sometimes the anger will have been about, well, people aren't behaving as they should, and I'm really angry generically at sort of the population as a whole. It might be one person, or it could be a thing such as COVID-19. I do get really angry about COVID-19. And how do I express that anger when it's this sort of amorphous thing going on, of an unseen virus that is impacting the whole world? How do I do that? And so therefore it's, okay, so what's going on? I've lost, because of COVID-19, people, jobs, security, safety, control. I've lost all those things. And so am I classically kicking the cat in, I'm letting rip at somebody because I'm really angry, but actually I'm sad. I had no one around at Christmas. All my family, couldn't come because we were in one of the tiers where we had to just totally self-isolate. I cried and I ranted and I raged. What was going on? It was a loss and a disappointment, because all the family that I was supposed to be with couldn't come. So, when it's like, how do I bring that back down to what's really going on in me? Is it a person that's made me angry? Is it a thing? And I guess as well, we gather justification as we go along, don't we? Like you mentioned road rage, I think, and it's like, well, it's justifiable because he was an idiot and he did something stupid. Our cars somehow become these little bubbles in which we have control and we own the world and we own the road in our little bubble. And actually, we don't. We're not 100% in control. And, am I redirecting my frustration with, I left the house late and I'm going to be late for my appointment, and someone's just got in my way and made me 30 seconds even later? And, is that really their fault? Is it my fault? Am I just justifying me being late? I don't know.
That's so true. I guess my last question would be, how can we reflect? What would be a good place for us to kind of reflect on our own way of dealing with anger? Because I found it really interesting as we were discussing how anger can be a raw emotion that we just feel, but it can also be a response to something that is another emotion. So like you can, for example, like we just said, how disappointment is an emotion in itself, but disappointment is also a thing that can happen to us. Whereas and anger is the same. Anger is an emotion, but it's also a thing that can happen to us. And I guess we can also, like, I've had moments where I've got angry on behalf of other people because they've told me about a situation, and I've just found it infuriating that person has had to go through that. And how can we reflect on our own way of dealing with it, but also just more broadly, I guess, as a topic?
I think one really important thing to begin with is that it's not always negative, and it's actually how we deal with it that can be either positive or negative. So anger can actually really energize us to put some wrongs right. If there's blatant injustice or unfairness going on, it can really rise up within us to say, right, I'm going to start a petition, or I'm going to go work for an organization that is seeking to put right those wrongs. So it can energize us in a positive way. It can also energize us to do something about the emotions and feelings that we haven't ever acknowledged before or allowed ourselves to. It can also protect us. If as a parent, I see my kid doing something that is actually blatantly dangerous and reckless, anger might be my emotion. That's because I want to protect them. And if they're doing something stupid or bad or that I know could be harmful, it's a bit like when a kid gets lost, isn't it? And the immediate reaction is, I'm so cross, where were you? And actually it's because of that protection that I wanted to show. So it's not should we be angry, but how do we be angry well, if you like. And so a lot of people would go the 4 A's route, which is the whole sort of arousal, appraise, approve, and act, which boils down to, so what has made me angry? Let's look at and really try and understand, is it injustice, and what do I do about it? If there are Christians listening to this podcast, then we often think, well, Jesus never got angry except when he turned the tables over. It's the classic one. But actually, we were reading this lovely book called Gentle and Lowly recently, and the author there talks about the compassion of Jesus as a really driving emotion for him. But actually, we then see, how could you have such compassion and not get angry, as you said, Jess, at the things that we see are wrong? So if it is that compassion that is driving that anger to make us either protect or to right wrongs, then let's say what has aroused, that's that first day, what's aroused that anger? And if it's compassion, then what are we going to do about it? And how do we right that wrong if we can? Then it's like the appraisal is, how do I react? What do I do about this? Is it count to 10? Is it go for a walk? Is it examine, well, am I really sad rather than angry? Then we go through that approval stage of, yeah, it's justified, or is it justified? You know, is it me seeing, have I lost perspective on something and need to regain that perspective? And then act is that 4th A. And do I let it out? Do I go and set up that petition? Or do I maybe sometimes just talk it out with somebody? Do I let it out in a healthy way by going for a, really quick walk somewhere and letting off steam that way? And act, how do I act it out? And it's how we deal with that and how we act that out, that doesn't cause hurt or harm to somebody else, but equally doesn't cause hurt or harm to us because we're denying it and shoving it down.
Wow, that's brilliant. Thanks, Lynette. Really appreciate your insight into that. It's so useful. I think I'd just close with, I guess, if you're feeling any kind of like pain or disappointment or anger, like just either take some time by yourself to just reflect upon that and ask yourself, I love that thing, like, is this caused by a person, or is this caused by a thing, or like an event? Or I think that's so useful. And yeah, either take time by yourself or just speak to somebody, because I just think a problem shared is a problem halved, isn't it? Absolutely. Yeah.
Finding, even if it's just that one person that you can be real with, is half of the battle, actually, because we tend to turn in on ourselves so much and either beat ourselves up because we're angry or deny it. And actually, it's also letting each other off the hook and letting each other know that we all get angry and it's okay, and we're not going to look down our noses at someone if they get angry. It's wanting us all to be able to acknowledge it and handle it in a healthy way, so it can come out in unhealthy ways. So talking to somebody is vital, Jess. You're absolutely right.
Thank you so much, Lynette. It's been great to chat to you today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Kintsugi Hope podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up next month.